Thank you. Saturday will mark 3 years since the Nottingham attacks. It will be 3 years since Ian, Grace and Barney were torn from their families in the most brutal of circumstances. For each of these families, their loss continues to be felt like it was yesterday. As their legal team, we see how raw their pain is at every turn. They've had no time to process their grief, given the scale of failings that continue to play out before them. They were failed before the attacks. They were failed in the immediate aftermath of the attacks. They were failed in the months and years that have followed the attacks. They continue to be failed. They were failed by those institutions tasked with keeping us all safe and well. The common theme has been a failure in leadership, badly letting down those at the coalface, who for the most part do a remarkable job in the face of poor working conditions, funding cuts and low morale. Leaders should lead, set the right example and not share responsibility, as too many have done here. The regulators tasked with overseeing those institutions have been no better, failing to hold to account weak and ineffective leadership, as well as tolerating poor practice and falling standards in the delivery of public services. The end of the Nottingham inquiry hearings is no more than a temporary pause. The families continue to fight on many fronts for truth, accountability and change in the face of cover-up and subterfuge. They thank you for the vital role you play in supporting them, spreading awareness and keeping the pressure on government to effect meaningful change. They will not rest until they have achieved as much as they can to protect others in the future, in the names of Ian, Grace and Barnaby. Over now to the families, starting with James, Darren and Lee on behalf of the Coates family. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lee Coates, son of Ian Coates. For the Nottingham inquiry, we've heard hours and hours, hundreds of hours of unimaginable things, so it's hard to compress it all into one short statement, if I may. From 13th of June 2023, my life, the lives of our families and the lives of many others were changed in ways that words on paper cannot fathom. I believe the Nottingham inquiry would provide some answers to why and as to what happened that day and in the lead up to that day. I wanted to understand how an animal like Valdo Calocane could be allowed to roam the streets and be free to do what he did. I hoped it would give me some form of closure and allow me to finally begin the grieving process properly. What we have endured in this inquiry, whilst leaving us with many more questions, has shown the catastrophic failings from all services and agencies involved. It has shown a lack of candour and blatant cover-ups. I am unbelievably grateful to our inquiry team and understand that not everyone who has lost a loved one murdered is as fortunate as us to have this process. It has, however, left an unimaginable toll, not just on my life, but on the people around me who have had to pick up the pieces. Nothing can prepare a bereaved person, especially whilst they're stressed and vulnerable, to navigate this process. Thank you.
Hi, I'm James Coates, son of Ian Coates. My father was a hard-working, deeply kind school caretaker who was just a few months away from his well-earned retirement when he was brutally murdered in my home city on June the 13th, 2023. Over the last 2.5, almost 3 years, my family and I have been forced out of our comfort zone, thrust into a public spotlight we never wanted, all in a relentless pursuit of the truth. On the 13th of June, and for what felt like a very long time after, we believed that the institutions of Nottingham had done everything they could and continued to fight in our corner to uncover the truth and give us the answers we desperately needed. Unfortunately, we were delusional in our ignorance. I wholeheartedly believed justice would be served, and I was wrong. Dad, Barney and Grace had been absolutely let down by the people I had previously held in such high regard. What has been revealed during the evidence of the inquiry has utterly astounded and disgusted me. Over the course of the inquiry, the true harrowing scale of the failures and laziness and negligence has finally been laid bare for the public to finally see. My eyes have been opened to what the public don't see behind closed doors. The failed warrant, the police have openly apologised to us during this inquiry for failing to execute that warrant. If they'd simply done their jobs and arrested him, there is a possibility my dad could still be alive today. The NHS discharge, to find out that a person that was so unwell was simply just sent back out into the public because his doctors and the psychiatrist couldn't find him, just astounds me. To learn that that's the sort of thing that goes on in the NHS, it's unbelievable. And the fact that there was a psychiatrist that warned that it could go on to kill someone should have been the biggest red flag. The treatment of our family before the inquiry has lacked basic human decency in how we were treated. We didn't find out about my father from a family liaison officer, a police officer, or any official body until 10 minutes before the wider public became aware. I've had to find out through social media. For 2.5 years, we've watched organisations close ranks, mark their own homework, and the inquiry must be the true reckoning. My innocent father is not here to see justice, and it remains an incredible bitter pill to swallow that a monster who carried out a premeditated, brutally calculated killing spree is spending his time in hospital rather than behind bars. The people of Nottingham and the British public at large put their trust in the police, the NHS and the judicial system. These institutions failed at every single level. We will continue to fight to the bitter end to ensure that absolute accountability is taken and the Noel family has to endure the preventable torture we live with every single day. I've spoken many times about how grateful I am for the hard work and mental torment the other families have put themselves through using their expertise and experience to pick holes in the evidence, speak out in the media about the wrongdoings, as well as being there for us when we needed them the most. You are all my family members now. I would also like to thank our legal team, counsel, and the various media outlets that have been biased the whole way through.
Hi, I'm Ian Coates' oldest son. First, I'd like to say thank you to the legal team. They've all been amazing. They're fantastic. Second, to the families. These people are very special people to me now. They are my family forever. I don't know how much and what names I can say, so I've kept them out because I could be here for a very long time. But yes, we want accountability. We're here for changes. But personally, I think, and the whole family, these guys are with me, we want action. We want action against these public servants that on the 13th of June 2023, when it changed all of our lives, massive failures. So between us, the families, we've been forced into this situation, and together we are not going to stop. We are so powerful now that we are all joined together and moulded together. We will not stop until these changes. I love these guys. The awful evidence that was shown in this inquiry, the awful demeanour of these people when they were sat in the chair giving this evidence, these professional people showed me that they're very disrespectful. And we will keep going and going till we get our justice for our loved ones. Thank you.
Hi everyone, David and Emma, Webber, Barnaby's parents. Also just wanted to make reference, because they're not here today, because we couldn't get a stage big enough, but everything that we do and everything the inquiry has uncovered is also, we must never forget, the people that had their lives changed forever that day. It was Wayne and Sharon and Marson, because what they've had to endure is unfathomable, and they've often been ignored and overlooked, and that's not right. So firstly, thank you for coming, and to so many of you, thank you for your support and your coverage over the past nearly 3 years. Without you, I sincerely doubt we would have gotten as far as we have. and you do need to be recognised and thanked. And this is a deliberately short statement for me, which Neil will be pleased to hear. 3 years ago, our beautiful son Barney was murdered in Nottingham. 19 years old, walking home from a fun night with his friends, with Grace, celebrating the end of his first year at university. His life was stolen in a moment because the systems that should have protected him failed completely, and a monster was left at large in the shadows to stalk his prey. For months, we sat through the statutory public inquiry and watched the evidence unfold. It's been brutal, bruising, and harrowing beyond measure, but it was so very necessary. Just look at what it has uncovered. Every single agency failed. Every single one, without exception. Mental health services failed to treat and manage. Police repeatedly failed to act. Agencies didn't talk. Individuals chose to look the other way. Warnings were ignored. People chose not to care or be curious. And the fear of stigma and bias was placed above safety and duty. And when it went wrong, too many closed ranks instead of owning their mistakes. There's cover-up over candour. This wasn't bad luck or an exception in Nottingham. It was a catastrophic collapse of responsibility. There is also the undoubted miscarriage of justice that must now be addressed. Valdo Calocane, 3 more, and the system let him plead to manslaughter. No murder conviction, no trial, no proper punishment that reflects what he did. That decision robbed Barnaby, Grace and Ian of justice, and it robbed us of the truth in a court of law. Clear evidence has come forward to prove that Calocane did have a history, that there were areas of his life and background and behaviour that should have been explored. Evidence of his insight, his planning and his culpability was overlooked by a weak prosecution and poor quality expert witnesses. A seriously mentally unwell man, yes, but one that knew entirely what he was doing. We cannot let this stand. There must be immediate recourse. The sentencing, the charging decisions, the entire handling of the case needs urgent independent re-examination. We will not accept that a triple killer evades accountability through his own manipulation and legal technicalities. We call today to meet with the government within the next month. The Prime Minister, the Attorney General, the Home Secretary, the Health Secretary and the Justice Minister. The findings of this inquiry will not be made until the spring of next year. However, that does not prevent action from being taken now. This isn't about vengeance, it's about doing the right thing, righting this grievous wrong and changing the systems that failed. The excuses stop here and accountability starts today. Thank you.
Good morning. The Prime Minister said yesterday that we're living in the most dangerous and volatile times internationally. To be prepared for this, we must have a safe and a stable country for our own people first. Saying that, I don't want to leave you in any doubt that, in my opinion, Valdo Calocane should have been convicted of cold-blooded, calculated murder of 3 innocent people, one of which was my brave and beautiful daughter Grace. He inflicted life-changing injuries on 3 other people. He would have and could have killed many others. He should have been found guilty of multiple homicide, and he should have received a life sentence. A life sentence of pain has instead been imposed on us. The Crown Prosecution Service in the Midlands got their charging decisions wrong. In the inquiry, we heard that they hid a crucial report in the MG6D secret schedule. The HMCPSI failed to inform us of this hidden file. The CPS and the HMCPSI both accepted a flawed psychiatric report that did not cover the basics. It didn't cover collateral history, was not contemporaneous and delayed by 5 months, where state of mind on the day of the attacks could not be assessed, apart from within a crystal ball, what I now call crystal ball psychiatry. A psychiatrist's report had the audacity to have the legal outcome of our case in the psychiatrist's own handmade notes. The Nottinghamshire Police, the emergency response that they held was woeful. They mishandled their investigation to a degree that's alarming. They were led poorly and they had poor professional standards. Positions of power don't come without responsibility that one can devoid. The Royal College of Psychiatrists cannot muzzle voices that have pointed out epidemiological correlations of race and mental illness. The Royal College of Psychiatrists must get its house in order. The Regional Mental Health Directorate of the Midlands has to answer why they failed to monitor and escalate obvious problems in the Midlands. Months before the attacks, there had been homicides and high alerts that were ignored. We have yet to hear from the National Mental Health Directorate and the Mental Health Director of the time. The Nottingham and Nottinghamshire Integrated Care Board failed to commission and monitor a safe service. The ICB has many questions to answer. The senior leadership at Nottingham Health Trust failed in all ways possible. From not formulating risk assessments, not following their own protocols on discharge, not making notes at multidisciplinary meetings, not following the fundamentals of good medical practice. The Department of Health must gather harm data accurately. The National Confidential Inquiry must be extended to not only homicide cases, but to serious harm caused by mentally ill patients. This data is grossly lacking and grossly underestimated. In my view, the new Mental Health Act of 2025 does not mitigate enough for risk. Those considering the Mental Health Act of 2025 were blasé as to the benefit of community treatment orders and only really included them because of our case. I leave it to Her Honour Deborah Taylor for assessment and advice of the Mental Health Act to the government. There is vindication today for pointing out the staggering failures that led to the avoidable Nottinghamshire attacks. This must never be allowed to happen again. Thank you.
Okay, we'll now do those questions from the floor. Come down the background so we can you can let us know who you are.
Emma Webber, Alison Mackenzie, ITV News Central. You mentioned people you now want to go to and make claims. Can you underline what you want to achieve from that and who you're going to?
Yeah, are you talking about the government? Yeah, basically it's most of the cabinet, because most of the departments of those that I mentioned have senior individuals that have failed, none of which have been held to account at all. And so we have to go. And Alison, whilst you're here, thank you for helping us secure our statutory public inquiry. It was good that you ambushed the Prime Minister at the time when he was up in Nottingham. And it is because of the noise that we've made that I believe that we're here. If not, we would be another tragedy. We would be another dusty report on shelves that is just missed out of hand. And so I think whilst we have to wait for the Chair to make her findings, the inquiry is part of this. It's not all of it. There must be immediate action against some of those senior people that Sanjoy particularly has alluded to. As we are here now, nearly 3 years on, nobody at any senior level in any of those agencies has been held to account. There's been an awful lot of early retirements. There's been sideways moves, and we've sat and heard how Hospital Trust should have the absolute responsibility for the delivery of services. So why are we not seeing heads roll with non-executive chairs, with the executive staff, all of which are on huge money? If you want to earn the big money, then you have to be big enough and good enough at your job. If you can't do it, then you have to go.
Martin Dorbley, GB News. First of all, just like to say, something I've said to you before, as somebody who was born in Nottingham, I'm ashamed of what happened to you guys. I sincerely am, and you're amazing people. On to my question. First of all, do you think that do you believe that the entire system folded and protected itself to keep Calocane away from murder trial? Because if it had gone to murder, he'd have been exposed, and so would the people who made these mistakes. They'd have had to give evidence, then the entire thing would have imploded. And secondly, if I may, to the Calocane family themselves, do you think they were reliable witnesses? And by the way, where was the father?
Sanjoy? You want to start with that one? I'm happy to pick the last one.
I'll take the difficult ones, Martin.
Wait.
I think, Martin, you've put your finger on something that I think we talked about during the inquiry. I think some of the evidence, in terms of self-harm was brought up, but I've examined all of the medical notes, and not once was self-harm mentioned in VC's medical reports. And medical notes or reports from anyone else. So I let the chair of the inquiry decide whether what she heard was the truth and the whole truth, and whether there were people who were conspicuous by their absence at the inquiry. But that is very much, I think, for Her Honour Deborah Taylor to assess for us.
Yeah, I'm going to chip in there because I believe the father should have given oral evidence. He didn't. He was given special measures not to. Sorry, Neil, but it is to us as parents to not hear from somebody who's the parent of the individual that murdered my son, who had direct calls from him the night before it happened, who was present when he arrived at their house a couple of times, driving from Nottingham in a clearly unwell state, and with mental health in his family as well. I believe that there are questions that it's not to vilify, it's actually just to seek the truth. So for me, that will always be a gap. Whether it's ever addressed or not, I don't know, but I'm prepared to say that because we did try really hard to ask for evidence from everyone we felt we really should be hearing from.
And on your first point, Martin, 100%. I think we've all seen now what's been unearthed in this inquiry has proven that there was cover-ups from the minute the police got hold of him up to our court dates and the hearings with the CPS. I think all of us families were played like a fiddle. We're still looking for answers to why exactly. But it does feel very much so that things were covered up, it worked out in his favour, and it's us lot that have to pick up the pieces, which is not justice in any way, shape or form.
Hi, Amelia Harper, Sky News. I just wanted to ask, do you feel that you had the opportunity to say everything that you've wanted to say, all of you, during the inquiry? Do you feel that you've been given the time and the space to do so? And also, you're referencing wanting government members to do more. What would your message today, now that we've had the conclusion on Friday of the evidence and inquiry, what would your message to Sir Keir Starmer be now?
Can I start there? There have been certain things in the inquiry that I would have liked to have unpicked more I'm into the detail, but the inquiry wasn't an adversarial process. It was there to open up the facts and the failures. I would have liked an adversarial. I think that was an adversarial process. As has been brought up, there were episodes when sat outside in the car, occasionally 999, who says that she didn't know. I mean, I think you're all family people here. If someone was sitting outside your house in a psychotic state, for you not to call the emergency services, it's quite alarming. I wanted to know some of the detail to some of the questions that I'd posed, and at every juncture and every report that we got from every authority, I sent a lengthy email back full of questions. I do feel that my questions haven't been answered because we weren't allowed a trial. If we were, then everything would have been answered for me. But the inquiry wasn't that forum. The inquiry there was to uncover all of the failures. So to answer your question directly, what I would say to the politicians, if we ever, possibly by any chance, have a trial, I would like the answer of all of my questions possible. Because there are outstanding matters that have not been answered directly because it was an adversarial process and I couldn't get the answer to all of my questions.
Can I add one more thing there when you said what we would like the government to do? I'd like to remind everybody that 30 years ago there was an inquiry called the Christopher Clunas inquiry where a mentally ill gentleman killed another innocent man that he did not know. The Ritchie report was produced. It discussed risk assessments, it discussed assertive outreach. It made a whole load of recommendations that made complete sense. There were complete parallels with two public inquiries happening 30 years apart. The recommendations of the Ritchie report were put in place, they were short-lived and they fell away. When Deborah Taylor makes her recommendations, which I'm sure will be robust and I have faith in her, they need to be put in place, but there needs to be some way of actually monitoring and following up how these recommendations are put into law, put into government, put into departments and not allowed to fall away. All these inquiries happen at taxpayers' expense, and the point is there's supposed to be proper and meaningful change afterwards. And I really believe there's a way that these need to be enforced and policed going forward in perpetuity to get the benefit of all of what something good has to come out of what the appalling tragedies that we've suffered, and that can only be that this doesn't happen again.
So during this process. My first question is to Neil. The families clearly want what they don't have currently, which is VC facing trial and on a murder charge. Can you talk us through, realistically, how likely that is, please? And also, Lee mentioned about the real hard work that the families have done, picking holes in the evidence, finding where there were gaps. I wonder if maybe somebody from the families could talk about how we're here today as a result of you guys having to take on an extraordinary amount of work while also grieving for your loved ones. Thank you.
I'll just address the second first. I know that's not addressed to me, but it does link into the first in a sense because as a legal team, we've never known a group of families like this. They're all pain and grief of what's gone on over the last 3 years, but their ability to campaign at a level that we've never seen before, and to secure a statutory inquiry in the time that they did, in the face of a lot of pushback initially, was incredible. And you heard Sanjoy today talk about not getting answers to everything. Well, I think that inquiry doesn't give you the answer to everything. We got there quickly, and we've not got an outcome yet, and we must obviously respect the process and leave her honour to come to her conclusions. But I think everybody saw enough from that inquiry to understand the failings before, during and after, across the institutions, between institutions, and really top down. So you've got people that draw big salaries that don't have the accountability at the same time. So that's a big area where the families are looking to campaign for change. But to go to your first question, at the minute there's no legal platform on which to look at VC's sentence. But these families have campaigned hard in many respects, and I don't put it past them to achieve a change in the law to allow that to happen, and that's part of the approach to government, to ministers, to Prime Minister, to the Health Secretary, to look at that, to look at the mental health legislation that's coming in that looks too patient-centric, at compromise of public safety, to look at aspects of the regulators' performance and their fitness for purpose. So in essence, I don't put anything past this impressive group of families.
I'm going to hold you to that.
Can I just add something to that as well? But the thing that people see is what sits here now, which is all of us looking like we're sort of in control of everything and it's all brilliant and we're fighting and we're great campaigners. But the actual cold hard reality is this takes its toll on all of us. We are in our personal lives pretty much destroyed, and we're fighting on to do what's right for our loved ones, and without sounding too glib, we're here to push on for the betterment of the country. As Sandra said at the beginning, this can't continue. We're seeing it happening more and more and more, and it's just got to stop. We've got to, there's elephants in the room that need addressing, and they need, we just need to get on with it. I know when we had a meeting early doors with Alex Chalk, and we were talking to him, and I remember him saying, and it probably goes back to what Neil's just said a second ago, alluded to, is just because it's the law doesn't mean it's right. And I think... And just because it's the law doesn't mean it hasn't got to change. Absolutely. So I forgot that second bit. That's quite important. Yeah, that's probably the important bit. But it just, we need to, as families, we will not stop. There's times when I know probably all of us have just felt we can't go on anymore. But I suppose the beauty of this, I call it the perfect storm. It's you've got very different people that can hold each other up when they need to hold each other up. And there's times when we're down and other people hold you up. I've had many conversations with Sandra when he's going on, I've had enough, but then he comes back and I do the same, and we all do it. We have to get change. I can't get to my deathbed, which feels like it's coming closer and closer all the time, without change. I need to know for me personally, and I know it's the same for these guys, for our loved ones, we need to make this change now, and we can't wait. I'm absolutely sure the chair will do the right thing, and the report will be robust. But the report's not for nearly another year, and how many people now need to die? How many people need to be assaulted? What needs to happen is change now, and that's what we need to get to the government now to say, stop tinkering, stop mucking around, let's get on with it. So
I think just on that point as well, I think the change should have happened a long time ago. It's been almost 3 years now, and it feels like all these institutions are just waiting to be told what to do. Like, they should be making these changes straight away. Every day you could turn the news on and someone's been stabbed, someone's been attacked, something's happened, especially in Nottingham, like the crime in Nottingham, like it's just disgusting. And the fact that nothing is being done, there's no proactivity from anyone. It feels like they're just sat waiting for the chair to give her recommendations so they can do it for a couple of months. And then, like Sinead said, like with the Clunish report, it just falls away and we're back to square one again.
Joshua Hartley, Nottingham Post. I just want to ask, obviously, being all the way through the inquiry, I wanted to ask about the excuses that you'd heard from individuals, if that makes sense. So I know that, from my memory, the police themselves must have said multiple times that they didn't have time to check systems, even if it was just a quick search. I just wondered what you made. I've seen sort of your reactions throughout the inquiry, sometimes in just kind of shock and disbelief at what people have said. I just wondered what stuck with you the most of what you've kind of heard over the 14 or so weeks in terms of people, what people have said in terms of why they didn't do what they should have done.
I think I think sometimes it's what they don't say is what's shocking, and it's the conduct, I believe, of some that has been really alarming. I believe that we've seen a lot of defensiveness, a huge amount of evasiveness, and actually quite a bit of arrogance and irritation at being there. And and that was hard to swallow. And whilst I know it's an inquiry, like Sanjoy says, it's not a trial. They take an oath to give the truth, and I wonder how absolute some of that truth is, because there's an awful lot of excuses, and once dug a little bit deeper and they're uncovered, then we have had some U-turns, haven't we, in what's been proven. And I think if you imagine doing your job, we all do things and sometimes we fail, or we don't make the right decisions, but 3 years down the line, you're going to have to put forward every email that you wrote, every piece of documentation you completed or didn't complete very well, WhatsApp messages and the like. It's that level of scrutiny is obviously unforeseen for most individuals, and it still shocks me how poor it's been. The excuses that we've heard, on the whole, aren't validated. There is a lack of resources, definitely, but there's a lack of resources in every department of every part of the country. And I actually think a lot of it is as simple as people just aren't doing their jobs properly. They don't care enough, and there's no recourse for proper accountability when it goes so badly wrong. And by holding proper accountability, I do think it will change.
Can I just jump in there? Josh, I'm going to tell you my low light as opposed to my highlight, because it's only bad stuff. The medics in Nottingham, the psychiatrists, it was staggering to hear some of the excuses, the poor risk assessments, the failure to treat. My own mother's a psychiatrist. She's in her 80s. She used to go to work in a prison in Dublin. And she said, why wasn't this guy given depot medication and treated properly? Why was he discharged after such short periods of time? And there was no continuity of care. We heard one psychiatrist, two psychiatrists. We must have heard from 8 psychiatrists all told. And there was no joining up of the dots, and he wasn't treated properly. And I blame the psychiatrist for discharging him without so much as a decent discharge letter to his GP or risk assessment. And I believe that's where a lot of the fault lies, in my view, as a doctor myself. I will never forgive them for their lack of treatment and their incompetent discharge. I don't believe they're fit to practice, and I will happily go on the record and say that. I do not believe they're fit to practice, and I think the regulator does need to take a look at some of these psychiatrists.
Yeah, and if I can, Josh, add to, as we call our low light, I mean, it was all there to see. We had senior police officers from Nottinghamshire Police, I mean, really senior, that didn't even know that my dad was out there laying his body cold for 15 hours until the day before. I think the day or day or two before, because we asked the question. We were the ones that posed it, and then we get a petty apology. We also had IOPC saying that they're waiting for the inquiry to get all the information. That's their job, is to go out there and find out these things, not for us to do all of the work for them. And I think we've just, it's a great question, but we could sit here for a good few days talking about every little failure that we've seen. But yeah.
Yeah, I think Darren alluded to, we've got you can imagine the rogues gallery that we've got, and there's a lot of them. And we will be calling for accountability and heads to roll, because we think it's justified. But also remember that we're not just facing the incompetence in people doing the jobs they're paid for properly. We've also had to face the most grievous and unforgivable level of misconduct in data breaches, police officers choosing to watch the body cam footage of Barnaby and Grace in their final moments being treated for no reason whatsoever, and that we were never made aware of that in sufficient detail until this inquiry. The disgraceful and disgusting WhatsApp messages that were shared between the police, the fact that we have uncovered at least 150 members of staff at the university hospital, so not the mental hospital, who chose to look at Barney, Grace and Ian's records, and the vast majority of them, we believe at least 2/3, with no justification. They're just looking, what do you want to do? Do you want to see what happened to Barney? Do you want to see how dreadful the injuries were? They were that bad, and that sickens me. And council staff accessing files. I don't know if I've forgotten. I've probably forgotten some, but we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of people. Oh, court staff and prison staff as well. I think that's with the CPS, Neil. Is that right? So I think it's the state of our public services in this country. It's conduct, and not everybody. It's so hard because it sounds like we hate all police and doctors. We don't. I feel so sorry for the vast majority that are good and decent people, but we just seem to have uncovered an awful lot of the worms.
Nehal Gohil from The Guardian. Thank you so much for making the time today, and I'm really sorry for your loss. What are the main legislative changes that you're calling for, or even changes to guidance that you're calling for? So the inquiry heard about the absence of communication between different agencies, GDPR restrictions, the guidance on sectioning and so on. So yeah, I'd be keen to hear what you are specifically calling for.
Can I let me start by first saying that I think with GDPR and things like that, I think there's a lack of understanding, which, you know, a humble GP like me understands, that the public safety comes over everything else. And that should be known to every doctor, otherwise you're not fit to practice. If you hear that public safety is going to be compromised somewhere, you're under duty to breach records. So people use it more to bring a sense of opaqueness rather than transparency, rather than, bring clarity. And that's wrong. I think the Mental Health Act, and this is only my opinion, I'm not a lawyer, I think the new Mental Health Act has vast gaps in it, and I think that doesn't cover risk properly. That is way too, patient-leaning in terms of safety. But I leave that to eminent lawyers like Neil and like the chair of the inquiry to suggest to the government what will be something that will protect the public. Because it's become amply clear through this process that protection of the public really does take a higher priority to me than the individual person. Otherwise, these things will keep happening. And there are several other things in law. The fact that doctors don't seem to know the codes of practice with how they practice. The fact that there are guidances out there that are not being used. There is no excuse for that. We all have continuous professional development. And to not know the codes of practice, of even discharge of your own hospital, for example, is utterly despicable. To not know codes of practice where the police had their codes of practice in terms of information sharing, it's already been laid down. To not know those is unbelievable and a complete failure.
Yeah. If you think about what happened with Calocane, he was discharged in September 2022. The responsible clinician was one of those giving evidence, and he was discharged for non-engagement and non-attendance at meetings. They didn't do a risk assessment. The letter that was sent for discharge was sent to a generic GP's address at the University Hospital, of which I think they had 40,000 plus students as patients, and there was nothing about his medication, there was nothing about his diagnosis. But remember, this is someone that had been sectioned 4 times. Every single section was for a violent assault on others. He'd had 6 mental health assessments within 2 years, and there was an outstanding warrant, no bail. And the lack of professional curiosity and professionalism, I agree with Sinead that that's not safe practice. So some things have been addressed already. I believe that doesn't happen already. It doesn't happen now in mental health trust, but we can't dismiss and we can't be afraid to talk about those who are so seriously mentally unwell, who have got violence as a risk and a risk to others, not just to themselves, because at least 2 people a week are being murdered through mental health crimes, and at least 250,000 serious assaults happen every year in this country where people sustain life-changing injuries. And only 40% of perpetrators who have committed mental health homicide have ever in the past faced any form of criminal justice for that. So what I'm saying is the indicators are all there. Over 90% of people who go on to kill through mental health have had contact with the police, yet only 40% of those have ever actually been prosecuted for anything. So it's clear those policies and procedures aren't being adhered to, and that's causing That's causing innocent lives to be lost, and it's destroying countless families.
Emily Williamson, BBC Midlands. A question for all of you. This weekend marks the 3rd anniversary of those dreadful attacks. I want to know, firstly, have you been told how the councils in Nottingham are marking it? Are there any official plans to mark the anniversary? And more importantly, how are you going to remember Grace, Barney and Ian on the 13th of June?
Well, I'll address the council. We're still waiting to hear back about all the teddy bears and stuff that were left on the 13th of June 2023. So we're 3 years down the line and we still haven't had that until yet. So that just shows, really.
Yeah, I think the local MPs, they got their picture at the time, back in 2023, and that's about as far as it's extended. Everything with regards to the anniversaries, last year we did the walk that was organised by the families, and I know Sinead, Sanjoy have organised something for this Saturday as well. But no, we've not heard anything from...
And we wouldn't be holding our breath for the council or anybody in Nottingham to do anything for us. Don't get me wrong, some of our best friends live in Nottingham, the Coates being them. The people of Nottingham are lovely. The council, the members of Parliament, they haven't reached out to us, they never have done. In fact, the council, I think, arranged their own little trip to church at the first anniversary, which they didn't even bother to notify us, but I think they just wanted a photo opportunity. So the answer, Emily, is that absolutely nothing has been arranged, but we ourselves, we as a family are going to visit the Lantern and go and have a prayer at St. Paul's Church. And we will, and the priest that presided over Grace's funeral will join us, and we will go to a spot, but on Ilkeston Road. But so this is somebody's home, and we shouldn't be, or this is a public street, and we shouldn't have to go to a public street to remember the victims of the Nottingham attacks. There should be something. I think they should have something a little bit more concrete to remember and be a memorial that people might be able to take a moment. But I don't know if it's not apparent to us at the council of any intention of doing anything, so it might be left up to ourselves.
It's such a shame as well, because of the people of Nottingham are wonderful. They all came together, and I've always said it felt like a massive cuddle at the time, people putting their arms around us. It wasn't just us sat here, just the survivors. This impacted so many people across the city. So I feel for them, there should be something acknowledgement-wise from the council. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I have the same view on that. As from the city, it happened in our city. We've been really busy these last few months. The last thing we've been trying to think of is what we're going to do to mark the day. That should have been in place for us. I'm from Nottingham, and I find it appalling. Nottingham City Council haven't done something. It's next weekend. It's appalling from Nottingham City Council.
I think we're going to just from the Webber family. This year we're not going to go to Nottingham. We sort of made a decision that Barnaby loved Cornwall, and we got a little place down there, and we're going to go to Cornwall with some friends, and probably haven't even said to Emma this year, but I'd like to probably go to Poleseth Beach, where Barney used to quite enjoy surfing and being there, and probably just put a rose into the sea for him. I think at some point, Sinead's right, we need to, there needs to be something, probably more, because, walking down that street is so painful for me. I don't want to keep doing that every year. I don't think I can. But maybe we need to have something there that's a bit more, as Sinead's just so rightly said, maybe that's going to come down to us to have to sort out, but we've had to sort everything else out, so,
I think this is a case that is going to change our country. I think this is a case that will make our country safer for families, for young ones. And I think this case and the unfortunate, our tragedies have played out in public. And I think not to have somewhere that can be dedicated to, it's an utter shame, because I think this case will make a difference to all of us. I'm quite confident of that.
Yeah, I think that the level of trauma that I carry, as Dave knows, I find it really difficult to go to Nottingham because just even to drive in, and it's certainly not the people. Present company.
I kind of looked at me.
Yeah. No, and it's something I don't feel, particularly after everything we've endured the last few months. But to anyone who is in Nottingham, if you see these guys, or these guys, or you want to light a candle or say a prayer, please do for the three of them, because I know it's a great city and I know how much Barney loved it. And yeah, I can't believe it's 3 years. It sounds a long time probably to normal people, but to us it feels like it was yesterday. So, but thank you.
Luke Shanahan, LBC, thank you for having us here today. And as another Nottingham-born reporter, I'd add my apologies that there's not more for you to come back to in the city. I just wanted to ask all of you, do you think this was bad luck, that all these awful failings lined up in the worst possible way for Nottingham and for your families? Or do you think it's just luck that's keeping us from losing our lives or our loved ones to something very similar in the future, tomorrow, next week?
I don't think
Okay, we're going to leave that press conference for now. That, of course, was a live event, and you may have heard a number of organisations and groups named in that news conference, and we will attempt to contact them for a response. And, of course, we don't get the full findings from the Nottingham inquiry, as you heard there, until spring of next year. You're watching Sky News. More after the break.
Something that can be stopped. The amount of opportunities to stop him that we've just had to endure over the last however many months it was, I've sort of, it's all become a blur to me now, but it's unforgivable. There were so many opportunities to divert his course, to stop him, and they weren't taken for a multitude of reasons through different agencies. So no, I don't think it was just an unlucky day for Barney, Grace and Ian. I think it was something that should never have happened. And I think they now know that, but I think their ability to admit it is zero. And I think they just wanted to, hence the speed they took it to a sentencing hearing. They wanted to just push it under the carpet, like they do all the time, try and get rid of it. And if we hadn't fought the way we fought, it would have happened. This would have just been something that people would have forgotten about by now, and we'd be sort of crawling into balls in our own little areas, doing nothing. Whereas now we have highlighted what happens to other families all over the country regularly, far too regularly.
There are many Calocanes amongst us out there. The SIO, Lee Sanders, who's top of that road list, one of them, he said to us when it happened, there was a sliding doors moment, you were unlucky. I mean, how insulting is that? It wasn't a sliding doors moment. This was somebody, he targeted students, he stalked students, he assaulted students. He knew exactly where he was, he knew exactly what he was doing. Don't say to me and to Barney's dad that it was a sliding doors moment, because it's not. And I think if urgent action doesn't happen, it will continue. It's not just university students. You can't send your children to holiday clubs. You can't catch a bus. You can't get on a train, because you don't know who's amongst us. And we have to be prepared to talk about the difficult facts and bear the unpalatable in order to make things better.
You can't have all of the services in Nottingham that we have pointed out that are failing all at once. The people of Nottinghamshire don't deserve that. You cannot have the regional mental health director who doesn't take any action on the facts that previous very highlighted cases by yourselves, your fellow journalists, have been present months before the Nottingham attacks happened, but didn't seem to do anything. There seems to be, the inquiry showed there seems to be no transaction between the regional mental health director, the national health director. There seems to be no transaction between the integrated care board linearly upwards. There seems to be no interaction between the mental health trust of the attacks, and they were homicides that happened a month before, 2 months before. There was a serious alert. For people in the city in these positions not to learn from those things, this was far from luck. This was bound to come to a point.
It was predictable.
And it was predictable, unfortunately.
The level of care that the patients in Nottingham are getting is predictable. And unless things change, it will happen again. It will. It will happen again.
And our children and our father paid the price so unfairly. So I don't think luck had anything to do with it. I think really it was the bisection of views that came all together and people who were failing. And it was bound to happen. You were bound to get that clash point, and unfortunately we all bore the brunt of it.
I think you said at the end of your question about the public, the general public feeling safe, like going out on the streets. A lot of people have said, oh, it's just wrong place, wrong time for Grace, Barney and Ian, but it wasn't. They were in the right place. They have every right to be doing what they were doing. Barney and Grace were going home after a night out. My dad was on his way to work. They have the right to feel safe in the city and to go about their business. The wrong person was Calocane being there. He should have never been allowed to be there at any point. And that's where, it's not down to luck. It's down, like Sinead Sandor just said, this was predictable a long time ago, and unfortunately, we're here because of it.
I think the other thing as well is and I said it, I was on the witness stand, is, lessons learned has to stop. We have to stop saying that, because the cold hard reality is people don't learn lessons, and the only way you learn lessons sometimes is through accountability. But Sinead mentioned the Clunas report 30 years ago. Well, there's your lessons. You've not learned a thing. So what else? You now have to change, and actually sometimes the only way to change is through accountability. Where people actually think, it's not about fear. It's not about we should fear that their job is going to go and they're going to lose their livelihoods or whatever it is. Because if you do your job properly, that's not going to happen. And that's all we've ever asked for is just do your job. If we got into this inquiry, or we started even before the inquiry, and seen evidence that everyone had done their jobs properly, and we were, as you just said, unlucky, it would have been okay. We're not doing this as a witch hunt. We're not trying to go after people, but it's turned into that, unfortunately, because they've all gone, well, it's nothing to do with us. And then you've all seen the evidence now. Actually, there's so many people that could have stopped it. So, it has, change has to happen.
Yeah.
Thank you. Fiona Hamilton at The Times. I had two questions, if possible. The first one is about that issue of accountability. And obviously, with the relation to the data breaches, people have been sacked and there's investigations. But I wanted to ask specifically about the medics who treated Calocane, the psychiatrists and others. Have you been given any assurance at all that cases will be referred to the regulator, and has a single person been placed under disciplinary investigation? And my second question was about the issue of the lack of adversarial process. And aside from his family, because you've articulated that already, are there any other issues that you feel would have been better examined that you feel haven't been? And I suppose I'm pointing partly there to the failure to section him for longer, the failure to section him in the first place, and the failure to give him depot. And would you talk us through if you feel there are elements there that haven't been properly examined, and why?
We'd start by some of the regulatory things, because Sinead and I are doctors, Fiona, and I think your questions are really pertinent. There's a lack of transparency in who has been referred to a regulator. Whilst I understand some of those reasons, I don't understand all of them, because we are here to seek accountability, because systems are made out of people, and if you don't hold them account, you won't change a system. We've been saying it all the time. And I think your question is so spot on, because we have had no transparency in terms of who has been referred to either any of the regulators with any of the professions to date.
My understanding is that nobody has been directly referred to the GMC. The hospitals have said, we keep the GMC alive of what's going on, But I don't think they can do that without the GMC actually scrutinising the medical management at each juncture. It's already become clear there's been criticism of the failure to Section 2. It's only for a short period, or Section 3, convert to Section 2. From what I can see, there's actually only one practitioner who's actually treated him appropriately. I'm not going to go into names, but out of all the encounters he had. So I'm going to say it. If they haven't been referred to the GMC, I think we as, we can seek recourse to that ourselves, because anybody's allowed to refer any doctor to the GMC as a private individual. And the fact that the hospital didn't even want to share the names of the psychiatrists with us in the first instance was not allowing us to have that right, which I think is outrageous. So these are parts of cover-up. Professional protectionism is rife amongst the medical profession. So they didn't want to share the names of these doctors with us. The only reason we got the names of the doctors is because of the public inquiry. The Trust didn't, and the NHS did not want to share the homicide review, the Themis report, and it was only the intervention of, in fact, the Times publishing an article and Wes Treating himself insisting that the Themis report was published, but even in that there was no names. So it's only through the public inquiry that we even get the opportunity to examine the individual clinicians that have been part of his failed treatment and his failed discharge and his multiple failed discharge, because he's had a revolving door of admissions in and out of hospital, never treated properly, never followed NICE guidelines. So yeah, I mean, the regulator needs to look at these doctors and they need to be scrutinised properly, and I'm happy to say that and go on the record.
Fiona, I think it's very, very important to highlight that your article in the Times was published absolutely at the right time for us to use and apply pressure on the Secretary of State for Health. And it's actually because of your article that he was pressurised into stating that hospital reports must be published for all victims, which is only fair. But let me still point out to you that medical reports are published with no names. So when we even ask people to say, could you number consultant 1, consultant 2, consultant 3, consultant 4, consultant 5, consultant 6, they didn't even mention that. The grade of the doctor, what type of a nurse. You cannot just fob off a family of victims with a report that doesn't give you even, the detail as to, we were asking questions right at the very last minute. Was it 4 consultants who sectioned him and 4 consultants who got it wrong, or was it 1 consultant that got it wrong 4 times? It's a big difference, and we weren't even given that level of detail, and that's why we have said through Neil that the medical report that was given to us is not fit for purpose. And because it's got way too many holes, yes, it's got recommendations, but way too many holes, and no victim should be treated like that. If there are reports there, some people get redacted reports where you can't even read a single word. And that's the contempt with which families of victims are treated. All reports, we must be transparent in this society, all reports should be given to victims' families. That's what they deserve when they've had a loss like ours. That's what all families in our country deserve. And it is completely wrong. It's treating them with spite, where the hospital give them reports that are completely redacted in the thin veil of GDPR, which is utter nonsense.
Yeah. Remember, sorry, just very quickly, we just had 11 members of staff sacked and 14 facing final warnings with regards to the data breaches of looking at our loved ones' records. And I've made it extremely clear that there will be further action being considered from us with regards to both the hospital and those individuals. And I say the same with regards to the court staff, the police and the prison service, and anyone who didn't do their jobs properly. I think the fact that NHS on the whole do no-fault investigations and reviews speaks volumes as to why it's in the state that it's in, and it isn't being vindictive, it's getting accountability, and we will pursue that. But a large part of the problem we've had is that as victims, when you're thrown into this horror show, you have no rights really, you have no advocacy really. We are fortunate we came together and fought hard for nearly a year before we were introduced to our legal team, who have then supported us so well since. But I'm very conscious of the many families and victims that haven't had, I can't say the word opportunity, but haven't been able to do what we've done. So this isn't an exception in Nottingham. I think, unfortunately, it's we've just been able to dig it out. So that there will be much further action considered against anyone and everyone who has inappropriately accessed data or failed to do their jobs.
Fiona, just on your question there, I'm going to be brief because Lee's struggling with his back, so we probably need to bring things to a bit of a close in a minute. I think one of our big frustrations is the abrogation of responsibility by the regulators. You know, we've had correspondence where we've been invited to put forward names to be referred to regulators. You know, that's not our job to do that. But I think, you know, Nottingham is not isolated. The issues in the NHS are much deeper and much wider. There are scandals in all sorts of NHS trusts, and that all becomes about because there's too much deference given to consultants in lofty positions that are unaccountable, that management committees can't get hold of, can't control. And we need to see that change. We need to see not only fat salaries and good bonuses and an ability to move positions in different trusts at various times, but responsibility attached to that. And the only way we can do that, so there's a top-down approach, and culture filters down to the lower ranks, because as you say, Emma, there's been a number of people that have been sanctioned and disciplined because of data breaches, but none of these are doctors, none of these are people in positions of authority. And until we have a top-down approach, until we have true accountability for people that are not doing their jobs, we'll continue to run the risk of similar instances as to why we're here today.
Okay, yeah, Neil, design question now. I know also going to do individual interviews as well, which I can't do. So really crack on and have a little break.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.